Welcome to the Innabooters. It's a podcast designed to find out more about people who live, breathe, have been born, work here in the northeast of Scotland in Aberdeen, but mostly their story and why they're attached and connected to the northeast of Scotland. We've got a variety of people joining us, and today I'm delighted to, well, as always, we let the guests introduce themselves. So please, can you tell us who you are, what you do, and who you do it for?
Hello there, nice to see you, Graham, and thank you for having me on the show. So my name is Robin Macpherson. I'm the head of college at Robert Gordon's College.
Okay, Robin, good to have you in the show. But the story, when you look at your backstory, we've met. We obviously know each other, but through the school and through stuff that we do. But there's always something interesting. There's always a nugget that you pull out of conversation. I go, my God, how did he find time to do that? So your affinity with Aberdeen in the northeast of Scotland, how did that start? Is it a recent thing? Is it a long-term thing? Tell us about your connection here.
So I'm one of these people that grew up in the northeast and then went away and then came back again in later life, having not necessarily expected to come back to this part of the world, but I'm absolutely loving it now. So grew up in Huntly, went to primary school at the Gordon Primary. My mum was a nurse at Aberdeen Royal Infirmary. My dad was the local minister at Huntly, Kearney and Glass. And really, I had a brilliant childhood in the northeast. I loved it. A really strong affinity for Huntly. So when we moved away, we went as a family to Edinburgh and then went to school in Edinburgh and then worked from Edinburgh to abroad to England and then back to Scotland. And then, many years later, I found myself actually being offered a job back in Aberdeen and really jumped at it because I suppose after the passage of time, you start to realise what it was you got from your childhood growing up in the northeast and all the fantastic things about this part of the world. So I'd had my own family by that stage, I'm married and two young children. So just thought, actually, if they can have the same childhood that I had growing up here, then that'd be brilliant. So I would want nothing more for them. So that's been the case. I've been back in Aberdeen for 4 years and thoroughly enjoying it.
And that background in Huntly, rural Aberdeenshire, growing up there, what are your memories of that? Was it big open landscapes? Was it fields? I mean, what are your memories from that you've brought forward?
Yeah, I think it was a childhood spent outdoors a lot. I was also really lucky with my dad being a minister. I grew up in a manse, which was fantastic. So, a classic sort of Church of Scotland manse. So great big house, real paradise for a wee kid, and sort of big garden. So we're out in the garden all the time. I love football, golf, any sport really. So I was down at Huntly Golf Club a lot, played golf every Saturday morning with my dad, and any spare time I had I would sort of go down there. Played for Huntly Boys Club football, and then a lot of time down by the Devon. Spent most of the summer splashing around in the river there with my mates, and we'd get kind of the old kind of car ring tire, the inner ring of a tire, and just jump in that and float down the Devon and then go back up and do it all over again. So I take my kids down there now and they love it as well. So it generally was a childhood spent outside. And I suppose all the sort of things we worry about now as parents and adults just didn't seem to be concerns at the time. It's not to say that those things probably weren't concerns, but I just felt very free-spirited and very open. And that, I think, has probably given me I'm not a risk-averse person by and large. So I think I grew up in an environment where you were just allowed to kind of run around and enjoy and climb trees and have fun. And I think that's something that I've carried with me into adult life.
And have you carried that through to your children? Is that's something that you've have a go, give it a try type thing, get outdoors as much as you can? That's something you continue to do? Yeah,
definitely. I really want my kids to have that approach, and they really love the outdoors, which is great. So they love going to the beach, they love going on forest walks. They don't seem to feel the cold, which is really good. So again, why growing up in this part of the world is ideal for them, and I want them to have that sort of sense of resilience and not being worried about things and wanting to try things. So, both my girls are perfectly happy climbing trees and going fishing and things like that. And I love that. It gives them a certain confidence, and, they're not put off by challenges in life, but they just have fun. So they're pretty free-spirited as well.
That experimentation, experiment, go have a go, try it out. You know, do it in a measured way, but go and try it out. I think is really important for all our children. So as you've moved through that, I mean, how have you experimented in your career? What have you done? Because in terms of you look at the bio and your background, what's led you around that path from university and then moving out of there? What did you want to go and do when you came out of uni, and where did it lead you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't take a particularly traditional route into education because when I finished university, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I wanted to carry on studying. I wanted to do a postgrad, but I didn't have funding for it. And I'd done history, so there's not a lot of funding for history. So it was a wee bit of a crossroads. And I'd worked my way through university doing, kind of work jobs in hotels, kitchens, pubs, and so on. I was working in a really nice pub actually in Oxford, and when I graduated, no idea what I wanted to do. So my manager, who was a fantastic woman, she basically said, "Well, we'll put you through the management training scheme in the meantime until you work out what it is you want to do." So I actually spent the first couple of years coming out of Oxford University with a history degree, becoming a pub manager instead, which was actually a brilliant life experience. Definitely gives you a thick skin dealing with some of the customers you have to deal with. It was a big food pub, so I learned how to cook and discovered I really enjoyed that. So I actually left there to go into restaurants and was working as a chef when I got a chance to go into teaching. So I thought, right, well, I can either stick with the catering thing or go into teaching. And I found that actually I've really I'd missed the intellectual side of my degree, and I love history. I'm a passionate historian, and my dad had encouraged me to go into teaching, so that's what I did. I sort of jumped at the chance. It was different days then. You were allowed to go into a school and start working and train on the job. So I did that route and did that for 3 years before I got qualified as a teacher, and then after that I thought, right, yeah, this is definitely for me. Because at that point I'd never considered it, but it was just really, I love my subject, and I was quite surprised when I got into a classroom to find that I love teaching as well as loving history. So those two things came together for me, and that was about 22 years ago now, I think. So, and honestly, never looked back.
I mean, massive changes in teaching over that period of time, but were you always drawn to that? Do you always feel that you were interested in educating? If that makes sense, were you always interested in telling a story?
Yeah, I think that was my dad rubbing off on me. My dad really was a huge influence in my life, and sadly no longer with us. But I can see now, especially as I get older, a lot of those influences that he, I suppose, exposed me to as a kid have really rubbed off. One of the things that I really appreciated in teenage years was that because he worked at the school I went to in Edinburgh, we would go and walk the dog every night about 10 o'clock when we were both kind of home and I'd done my work for the night, and so would he. So we just go and walk the dog and have a chat. And my dad was a religious studies teacher, but really interested in philosophy and politics and the big questions about life. He was curious about science. So we would talk about all these kind of big ideas, and he gave me a real sense of intellectual curiosity. So, and I love reading as well. I'm a voracious reader. So I think that when you get into a classroom, those are the things you get to talk about. And if I'd gone into any other walk of life other than perhaps being a historian, then perhaps I wouldn't. So it's probably a natural fit that I didn't realise at the time that that's how the groundwork was being laid for that career later on. But I'm grateful to my dad every day for the fact that I get to have those kind of conversations with people as a day job. It's lovely.
It's great that you say that. It's a lovely fond memory that you have in that whole series of them, that walking. And I bet there was a lot of questions. He was asking you why, and so he was getting the dialogue going rather than making a series of statements. He was guiding you just through conversation by the feel of things.
Yeah, he was very Socratic, and actually that's another thing I've quite consciously done now that we've got a dog, and I take my daughters out, with the dog and walk and talk to them about life, and it's just time set aside that you can have that space to have a conversation and to explore ideas and get to know each other better and build your relationship with them, which, I realised that my fond memories of, and my mum as well, come from hundreds of hours of walking the dog and just talking about things, and that's really healthy to do. So I always try and create space in the day for that with my kids.
Yeah, stealing those moments or those minutes, you never get them back, but it's what you do with them, and it can be so constructive to the relationship for them. It just builds that brain, but it's also therapeutic as a parent. When you get conversation, you do think about how other people are naively looking at the world, or with a point of view that is yet to be formed, so to speak. So that's really interesting. So you're talking about that education and learning and teaching and that whole interest and that thirst for knowledge, because you're still reading. Then you're sort of flipping into curating and writing a book. What came first? You worked, am I right in saying you worked in the Fringe as a curator at the Fringe, or did that become before the book writing? How did that sort of piece together in your journey?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest influences in my career was Sir Anthony Seldon. If people know him, he's one of the most significant figures in British education in the 21st century. And I actually read Anthony's books when I was studying at school myself, because he's a political historian. He writes biographies of prime ministers. But I hadn't realised that he was also a head teacher. And then when he took over Wellington College in England, he really started to revolutionise it, but also introduce things that were, across the whole country, really. So the reason we talk about things like mindfulness and well-being in education, I think Anthony was the pioneer of all of that. So when I saw that he was looking for a head of history, I thought, right, I really want to work for this guy. He's making things happen. So I luckily got the job, and Anthony asked me a question at interview. He said to me, "What book are you working on?" And I thought, I'm a history teacher. I don't have time to write books. And then I thought, well, he's writing books, so clearly he's got time, and he's a head teacher and he's busier than I am, so I don't really have an excuse. So I didn't give him a very good answer to that, but it made me think, right, actually I do want to write a book. This would be great. And I managed to get a deal with a textbook publisher, Cambridge University Press. Learned a lot from the process. You learn an awful lot from suddenly having your own writing really scrutinised by editors and kicked into shape, and it makes you convey information, I think, much more concisely and clearly. So it was really like boot camp for your writing, which I never actually had at university, where you're just encouraged to write at length and somebody marks it and tells you if it was any good or not. But this time I was getting really robust feedback about how to be a better writer. So that led into wider academic publishing. So I went from writing about history into writing about teaching and learning. And then I started blogging, and the back of my first book that I did outside of textbooks, I was friends who were writing blogs, and that was becoming quite a big thing in education. It was about 10 years ago, so I thought, I'll give it a go, set up a website. Never done a website before, so I had to learn how to do that, and started putting blogs out, sharing it on Twitter and platforms like LinkedIn, and just got nice feedback about it. I thought I was going to get absolutely slaughtered for it, but actually realised there's a big community of teachers out there who like reading, who like sharing ideas. So I still advise teachers to do that now. If you really want to challenge yourself professionally and you're really confident about what you do and why that's good, then try writing, share that more widely, and reach out to the wider world. And Anthony was brilliant for that. He was able to bring in lots of interesting people. We always had, it was the media, it was other schools and lots of other think tanks coming in to see what he was doing. And I got to meet some incredible people. So through that, I got put in charge of the Festival of Education that he set up. So it's a 2-day thing that attracts about 5,000 people, and my job was to book 300 speakers for it, which was amazing. I absolutely loved doing it. Learned a lot about events management, about content curation, about a lot of my day job was to read about the big themes in the wider world of education and identify the movers and shakers and get in touch with them and say, do you want to come and speak? So I learned a lot about the wider world of education through that. And then when I came back to Scotland, the woman I'd worked with in the Festival of Education, Louise Hunter, was absolutely brilliant. She and I, she moved back to Scotland at the same time, so we wanted to do a show at the Fringe. So we did that in 2019, and it was great. And we were going to repeat it in 2020, but sadly COVID got in the way. So we still haven't completely given up on the idea of reviving that, but it was fantastic because we basically hired a venue for a week, put on lots of different events in it, and although it's tough to get a Fringe show up and running and make a break even in year one, but we did pretty well with it, and we thought, well, it's definitely a basis to do this again. So it's good fun. So I've always tried to keep my core job going, do that to the best of my ability, but then also try and find other things that are going on in the wider world of education so that you can contribute to making education broadly more successful and better for everybody. So it's a curiosity thing. I love my job as I do it, but I also like keeping plugged into the wider world of education, so the two things support one another. I think it makes me better at my day job if I'm also keeping an eye on what's going on in the rest of the world. So yeah, it's all fun. I'm terrible at saying no. That's the other thing. If somebody throws something interesting my way, I find it very hard to say no.
It's a discipline we all have to hone in on a little bit more. Tell me about that feedback, Luke, that you're there in Wellington being asked by one of your heroes, perhaps. Maybe that's a strong word to use, but someone and you're now. What book are you writing? And immediately you feel challenged by that, but you get off your backside and do something about that. Yeah. So you've never really written a book before. You've written lots through your university and the career education side, but you now have a formula that says, that's you writing, but this is how a book needs to be written. How do you feel you responded to that? Because it's constructive criticism, but it's a structure. How did you adapt? How quickly did you adapt? Did you find that difficult?
Yeah, I think the two things that has really helped me as a writer, firstly, was by having editors who change my style, and that's difficult to do. It's like trying to change your golf swing. You know, something you've been doing all your life, and suddenly you have to reinvent it, and that's tough. So, and practically what happened was they were giving me word counts for chapters and content lists, saying you've got to cover this content, that's your word count. And I remember writing my first chapter. It was meant to be 8,000 words, and I did a first draft, and then I cut it and cut it and cut it, and I got it down to 11 and a half, and I said to them, you cannot write this in any less of a word count to cover that content. I've been as merciless as I can, but you're going to have to expand it. And they came back with a pretty sharp reply, and started going through it with me, and ruthlessly red penning the thing, and I actually got it into 8,000 words. And I thought, oh right, you can really turn a 20-word sentence into a 12-word sentence and improve it and carry the same amount of information. So my writing style became much more concise as a result, and the rest of the chapters I managed to get in at the same time. Another thing that I've really enjoyed doing with the two main books I've done more broadly about education have been with writing partners. The first one with Carl Hendrick and the second one with Kate Jones. Both of them have done a lot more writing than I have, and been really commercially successful. Kate is a best-selling author that's known around the world. And actually that creative process where you basically sit down and have a planning meeting in the morning, and then you go away and you both write, and then you come back at the end of the day and look at what each other has done, and you comment on each other. So again, I learned so much from them, and they're both great writers. Carl knows the academic landscape incredibly well, and has also got a very sort of particular style. He was writing for magazines before he started writing academically, so he's got a great sort of hybrid style. And Kate is just a brilliant communicator, and she really knows her stuff. So you can read her things at speed, but she's conveying very complex ideas in kind of everyday language for teachers, which is why I think she's been so commercially successful. So both of those fed into my writing style. So I would say the way I wrote coming out of university now is almost incomparable. It's completely changed, and for the better, because if I hadn't worked with those other people, I'd still be writing the same way I was many years ago, and writing at length and not particularly well, probably.
And that would be possibly writing for yourself and not your customer or your end user.
Yeah.
And I assume that that's what's happened. You've flipped from it being a hobby and an interest that you're passionate about to actually telling a story that other people can relate to and will ultimately read or buy or ingest or digest.
Yeah, and actually, do you know what? I love Twitter. I was advised to get on Twitter in about 2011 and discovered that we talked about microblogging in those days. I don't think we use that term anymore so much. No. But was that idea of how can you express something in one or two sentences as a powerful idea? It's the whole thing of like the 6-word short story. And I love that, because actually that was a skill that I didn't have and I didn't realize I needed. And now I find it incredibly useful every day. Even something like writing your emails, I have to write about 100 odd emails a day. Well, if you can convey something to somebody in common sense in a sentence, it saves you an awful lot of time that you can spend on other things. So writing concisely is incredibly difficult to do, and it's now something I focus on as a teacher. Is to say to my kids, right, if you can write that in 150 words, let's write the same thing in 100 words and see if you can make it better. And they find it difficult, but it's the art of copywriting, isn't it? It's really important, and I think it's significant in so many disciplines now that it's a really significant skill.
Concise communication is an art form.
Yeah.
It is in any format. It is an art form, and especially in teaching, because an in-person lecture for an hour can be boring, but even when it's online, it's 10 times as boring. So the challenge to make that subject matter much more, and it's because you have options now. You have your phone next to you, so you can be easily distracted, and you get your 3-minute fix from that video or that story or whatever. So I think people's attention spans, have they been destroyed? They've certainly been impacted. So that the challenge to be concise in just about everything we do nowadays is a big one. And you're continuing that. Like if you look at the blog now, you've got some great stories about your international visits and Denmark, and then there's a New Zealand one in there as well, if I remember right. Yeah. And it's taking those experiences back in. So you're still seeking those experiences sort of beyond your doorstep, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I worked in the Middle East for 3 years, and I worked in Hong Kong for a summer, and just found it fascinating. It was just a completely different way of engaging in schools and teaching and learning and the culture around education. And I just found that fascinating and recognise that there's a lot of things I learned there that don't transfer back to the UK and Scotland particularly, but there's some that really do. So I always think that we are making Scottish education stronger by tapping into those other ideas and thinking about how we adapt them for our context. So I always think if you're going to write a blog, try and share something that people will find interesting that they maybe don't know. And I'd like to actually spend more time blogging, because I'm one of these people that's got lots of drafts sitting in a folder where you've got a title and an idea, but you just need to flesh it out, and just having more time to. But I do like to try and write something, especially in the holidays. It's a good self-reflective exercise. But I'm really fortunate in the job that I do. I get to connect with other schools, I get to connect with universities, I get to go to different conferences and events, and we're involved in lots of projects. So I was trying to share those ideas. There's not enough time in the day to share them all, but the really good ones, it's worth putting out there. And I just thought, like the visits I did to New Zealand and Denmark in the last couple of years, I took on so much there. I thought, this would be brilliant if we could do this in Scottish education. Let's start the conversation, and doing a blog is a good way to do that. And it's also quite interesting if you set up a WordPress site, you see who's reading your blogs. And the different pockets of the world that are responding to it. So some of the things I write gets a big audience in America. Some other things I write get a big audience in Bangladesh. It's fascinating to see.
And we'll get to that technology part in a second. What's your favourite bit of tech and how it's changed it. I don't want to get political in any shape, manner or form, but you work at Robert Gordon's College, which is a private school in the centre of Aberdeen here in the northeast of Scotland. I'm very fortunate that we've put 3 happy, healthy, well-educated children, you'll be glad to know, Headmaster, through the school. They're now in bigger life and doing phenomenally well as young adults. But the college itself does very well. There is a perception about private schools, so we'll park that. The quality of education coming through the college has recently been recognised about your standards and your ability and the makeup. And it's worthwhile talking about that, because you must be very proud of what you and the team there are achieving.
Yeah, incredible. There's something really special going on at the school here that I recognised as soon as I set foot in the door. I sometimes go back to the first time I came to the school was a couple of years before I applied for my job, and I was asked by a friend to come and do a training day with the staff, and it was a powerful experience. I thought, wow, they're really switched on, they're very curious, they're very well read, but they're also very open-minded and want to improve what they do, and they're clearly doing a very good job, but they're driven by wanting to get better, and I thought, well, that's the environment I want to work in. So my job came up, and I thankfully got it. Came in and found that exactly is the culture, and the governors, I think, deserve a lot of credit as well, because they encourage us as a school to be forward thinking and to have that bravery and courage to experiment with things and to not sort of rest on our laurels. So the school really does move forward at a better pace, I think, than any other independent school in Scotland. So there's just something in the DNA, there's something in the water here that we're able to do things. So when your projects like our online school, RGC Online, or the work we've done around EDI, it comes from, as I say, not being risk averse and being willing to experiment and constantly challenging yourself to be better and do more for the children that you've got. And as a result, we attract people into the school who buy into that as a philosophy. So it's one of those things that just becomes a virtuous circle. The school keeps on getting better. And I'm really, really lucky to work with incredible colleagues. I know people always say that, it sounds like a platitude, but genuinely, we've got a really, really, really strong team. People who are incredibly passionate, very knowledgeable, but very humble, very hardworking, and all of that is modelled to the kids. So their curiosity is enhanced by that. We just worked hard to put lots of opportunities for them, and they get to experiment and play with big ideas and big opportunities. And as a result, when they leave here, the world is their playground, and that's really lovely.
Yeah, and playing on that, what do you feel is your most important personality trait, or strength? Let's focus on the strength side of that. And is it a northeast thing, or have you brought it with you? And then what do you look for in your pupils coming through school? What do you want them to have? Is it similar? So you, first of all, what's that personality trait that you're most proud of?
I suppose we've been talking about a lot so far and used this word a lot, but I think curiosity probably is one. And I do think that is a northeastern thing as well. This is a part of the world that was very rural. It was all about agriculture, but it was also connected to the wider world through our ports and harbours. And Robert Gordon's a great example of that. Someone who was, could have just been a stayed as a kind of landlord and aristocrat in Aberdeen and a merchant, and made his name that way. But he up sticks and went to Poland and traded internationally, and that's how he made his way in the world. And I think that is a Northeastern thing, that desire to go out, to explore, to take risks, to be commercially minded. All those things is driven by that curiosity, a mixture of curiosity and ambition, I would say. It's a different kind of ambition in this part of the world, because I think people here, it's not driven by ego. They don't want to be the big I am. I think they are driven more by the curiosity side of ambition, where they just want to make things happen and they want to help other people. They don't want to blow their trumpet about it. They don't want the headlines. They just want to actually make things happen on the ground. And I suppose I experienced that growing up in this part of the world as well, is that by being encouraged to run around. I had great teachers as well at the Gordon Primary School. They were phenomenal. So they encourage you to go out and do things, and as a result, I'm not risk averse. I am curious, so that's a nice combination to experiment and to try to make things happen.
I mean, it's the reason for this podcast. I think that there are a lot of people like yourself who've got a great story to tell, who are doing a fantastic job in your role and are impacting people immediately around you. But it's a great story to share, because we have so many people in and around the Northeast that are not driven by ego, are driven by curiosity and success and all these other things that bring with it. And that's a drive to do more, do better, be ambitious, travel, whatever that may be. We talk about tech because we're a tech company, as you know, but what's your favourite bit of tech? You must have seen that evolve in your personal life, in your travels and all these things, but certainly professionally. But what's your favourite bit of tech? What's a piece of tech that, and it could be software or hardware, that you've gone, okay, that's clever?
Yeah, can I go really old school on this?
Yeah, of course you can.
The thing that I really loved as a kid, that I think has always given me a positive attitude towards tech, was my Amiga 500. I was a big fan of Amiga. I just thought it was brilliant, and the games that you got on an Amiga, I was quite a gamer as a kid, and if I had more time now, that's the thing I'd try to fit into my life a bit more. But it was just brilliant storytelling. It was so creative, and it just opened up a whole new world. So I loved reading books, but I felt like playing a game in an Amiga was a bit like exploring a massive story as well, and particularly kind of point-and-click adventures, that sort of stuff. I loved it. I think as a result of that, I was always curious, not just about the potential of a computer as such, but it was more actually the storytelling, the narrative, the graphics, all of that side of it that I really loved. And I'm now a middle-aged man. I kind of follow groups on Facebook of people who are nostalgic for Amigas and all the rest of it, and kind of games pop up, and you remember, it's like, that was such a great story. Where did that idea come from? Like the creativity around it, I think, was fantastic. So it was that marriage of a bit of hardware with a big imagination that I think is what you're always looking for in a great bit of tech now. I like tech to be functional, I like it to get things done, but I like it when it tells me a good story. So that's probably where I'd go for my Amiga. It's my favourite bit of tech. Groundbreaking thing.
Good. Great answer. I love that. I love that one. So we're coming to the end of the session. The bell has rung, just to play on that pun, Headmaster. I'm very sorry about that. I'm going to give you 4 quick fire questions, and they need to be quick fire if you're ready. D-side or C-side?
Oh, that's tough. You'll just 5149 C-side. My wife would be the other way.
Okay. There you go. Writing a book or storybook Glenn?
Oh, I do love writing. I have to say, I love it. Although I did go to Storybook Glen as a kid, so maybe that would inspire me to be a writer.
Do you prefer teaching or learning?
Oh, I'd say they're the one and the same thing.
Good answer.
Yeah, I couldn't separate those.
Okay, and we ask everybody this: buttery or fine piece?
Buttery. It's got to be a buttery.
Always. Well, for me personally, butteries are now sort of 60-40 in the answers. Robin, it's been a pleasure chatting to you. It's been a great hearing your story. We could have gone much, much longer, and it's been really interesting. Robin Macpherson from RGC, thank you for being in a booter.
Thank you very much for having me, Graham. It was an absolute pleasure.